Let's talk about the MCU, an epic universe, but not every film is a winner. For every Endgame, there's a movie that just misses the mark. Today, I'm ranking my bottom 3 MCU films and breaking down what went wrong. This list is personal, honest, and probably controversial. I'll dig into storytelling, character arcs, and why these movies just didn't work for me. Grab your popcorn and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive into the biggest fumbles in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. At the very bottom of my MCU ranking sits Thor: Love and Thunder, a film that, despite its flashy marketing and star-studded cast, manages to fumble nearly every opportunity it's given. This movie is a masterclass in wasted potential. The tone is all over the place, with jokes that undercut every serious moment. It's as if the filmmakers were afraid to let the audience feel anything real, so they drown every scene in forced humor, even when the stakes are life and death. Gore's tragic story and Jane's cancer arc deserved real emotional weight, but the film treats them like punchlines. Gore, one of the most compelling villains in Marvel Comics, is reduced to a background threat, and Jane's battle with cancer, an arc that should have been deeply moving, gets lost in a sea of slapstick. Natalie Portman's mighty Thor should have been a highlight, but her struggle is glossed over for awkward humor. Instead of exploring her transformation and the emotional toll of her illness, the film rushes through her journey, using her as a prop for gags rather than giving her the respect and depth she deserves. Christian Bale's Gore is menacing, but he's barely in the movie, and his threat is never truly felt. The film teases a dark, terrifying villain, but never commits to letting him be the force of nature he should be. Instead, he's sidelined, his motivations barely explored, and his presence diluted by the film's relentless need to crack a joke. The visuals? Shockingly bad for a $250 million film. Some CGI looks unfinished, and the Shadow Realm is a missed opportunity. What should have been a visually stunning and atmospheric location ends up looking flat and uninspired, with effects that feel rushed and incomplete. Thor's character regresses into a caricature, losing all the depth he gained in previous films. After his growth in Ragnarok and Endgame, it's jarring to see him reduced to a bumbling goofball, with none of the complexity or vulnerability that made him interesting. Valkyrie and Korg are sidelined or reduced to running gags. Valkyrie, who was once a fierce and compelling leader, spends most of the film looking bored or cracking jokes, while Korg is little more than comic relief, robbed of any real purpose or development. The film tries to be a rom-com, cosmic horror, and family drama all at once, but never finds its footing. It juggles genres without ever committing to any of them, resulting in a movie that feels disjointed and confused, never allowing the audience to settle into a single emotional tone. It's a shallow adaptation of a powerful comic arc, prioritizing gags over gravity. The source material is rich with emotion and stakes, but the film seems more interested in chasing laughs than honoring the story's heart. Even Jane's death, which should be heartbreaking, feels empty because the film never lets us take anything seriously. The emotional beats are rushed, and the impact is lost amid the constant barrage of jokes and tonal whiplash. Love and Thunder is the worst example of the MCU's recent obsession with forced comedy. It's as if the filmmakers believe that if they keep the audience laughing, they won't notice the lack of substance or coherence. It had all the right ingredients: talented actors, a beloved comic storyline, a massive budget, but the execution is a disaster. Every promising element is squandered, leaving behind a film that feels hollow and unsatisfying. It's not just a bad movie, it's a profoundly disappointing one. Fans expected an epic emotional adventure, but instead got a shallow, unfocused mess that fails to do justice to its characters or its story. That's why, despite all its potential, Thor: Love and Thunder lands firmly at the bottom of my MCU ranking, a cautionary tale of what happens when style and jokes are chosen over substance and heart. Next up, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, a film that was supposed to kick off the next era of the Marvel Cinematic Universe with a bang, introducing a new, formidable villain and expanding the franchise's cosmic horizons. Instead, it fizzles out almost immediately, leaving audiences with more questions than excitement. This movie had the potential to be a game-changer, but it stumbles right out of the gate. The quantum realm, which should have been a visually stunning and imaginative new world, ends up looking like a bland, murky CGI mess. There's no sense of wonder or discovery, just endless, uninspired digital backdrops that feel more like a video game cutscene than a blockbuster film. The lack of visual personality makes it hard to care about what's happening, and the world never feels real or lived in. The plot is as generic as they come: rebels versus an evil emperor, with none of the heart, humor, or cleverness that made the first two Ant-Man films stand out. Instead of a fun, inventive heist or a heartfelt family story, we get a by-the-numbers sci-fi rebellion that could have been lifted from any other franchise. The stakes are supposedly huge, but the emotional investment just isn't there. Scott Lang, once a lovable and resourceful hero, is reduced to a bumbling dad who stumbles through the plot. Hope, the Wasp, is barely given anything to do, despite being in the title. The family dynamic, which should be the heart of the movie, feels forced and awkward, with characters talking at each other instead of connecting in any meaningful way. Janet and Hank, who could have brought wisdom and depth to the story, are reduced to exposition machines, constantly explaining the plot instead of participating in it. Cassie, Scott's daughter, is rewritten as a generic rebellious teen, lacking the charm and nuance she had in previous appearances. The film tries to set up a new generation of heroes, but it never gives them the development or screen time they need to shine. The only real bright spot in the film is Jonathan Majors as Kong. He brings an intensity and menace to the role that immediately elevates every scene he's in. Majors' performance hints at a much more interesting villain than the script allows, and for a few brief moments you can almost see the movie Quantumania could have been if it had focused on character and stakes. But even Kong, with all his potential, is ultimately let down by the writing. In the film's climax, he's defeated by a swarm of giant ants, a moment that completely undermines his threat and makes the supposed next big MCU villain look ridiculous. It's hard to take him seriously after that, and any sense of danger evaporates. Then there's MODOK, a character who could have been a fascinating addition to the MCU's rogues gallery. Instead, he's played almost entirely for laughs, with a bizarre character design and an arc that feels more like a punchline than a real story. His presence is more distracting than entertaining, and he never fits into the tone of the film. The film can't decide if it wants to be a serious, epic sci-fi adventure or a wacky, self-aware comedy. It tries to juggle both tones and ends up failing at both, leaving the audience unsure whether to laugh or care about what's happening. The result is a movie that feels tonally confused and emotionally hollow. More than anything, Quantumania feels like corporate homework, a movie made to set up future MCU projects rather than tell a compelling story in its own right. Every scene seems designed to tease the next big thing, rather than deliver a satisfying narrative here and now. It's a checklist of franchise obligations, not a film with its own identity. The stakes are supposedly massive, with the fate of the multiverse hanging in the balance, but the characters are so forgettable and the world-building so shallow that it's hard to care. The supporting cast is filled with one-note side characters who never get a chance to stand out, and the quantum realm itself is just a backdrop, not a world you want to explore. Remember the first Ant-Man? It was charming, inventive, and full of heart, a small-scale heist movie with a big personality. Quantumania, by contrast, is loud, hollow, and exhausting, losing all the qualities that made the original special. The sense of fun and creativity is gone, replaced by generic action and empty spectacle. In the end, Jonathan Majors' Kang is the only reason to watch this movie. He brings a gravitas and complexity that the rest of the film sorely lacks, and for a few scenes, you can glimpse the kind of compelling villain the MCU desperately needs. But even he can't save the movie from its own mediocrity. When you leave the theater, you're not talking about the adventure or the stakes. You're talking about how weird MODOK looked or how strange some of the choices were. The film leaves you with confusion and disappointment, not excitement for what's next. Quantumania is a missed opportunity, a film that could have been a bold new chapter for the MCU, but instead lands as a low point for the franchise. It's a movie that feels more like an obligation than an adventure, and it's hard not to walk away feeling let down. Ultimately, it only ranks above Love and Thunder because of Kong's performance. Without him, Quantumania would be completely forgettable, a cautionary tale of what happens when a franchise loses its sense of fun, heart, and purpose. Now let's rewind to Thor, The Dark World, a film infamous for being utterly forgettable. When people talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this is the movie that almost never comes up, and for good reason. It's the kind of film you might watch on a rainy afternoon, only to forget you ever saw it by dinner time. The main problem? It's bland. There's no spark, no sense of excitement or wonder. Everything about it feels like it's been run through a filter that drains out all the color and personality, leaving behind something that's technically functional but emotionally empty. The story is driven by a red MacGuffin, the ether, which is supposed to be this all-powerful force, but it never feels threatening or important. It's just a plot device, a glowing object everyone chases because the script says so. And then there's the villain. Malekith is one of the MCU's most boring antagonists. No depth, no nuance, just a generic evil plan. He wants to plunge the universe into darkness, but we never really understand why or what makes him tick. He's less a character and more a cardboard cutout of a villain. Christopher Eccleston is wasted under prosthetics and bad dialogue. You can almost feel his frustration through the layers of makeup, as if he knows he's capable of so much more but is trapped in a role that gives him nothing to work with. The visuals are drab, Asgard is muted, Svartalfheim is a gray wasteland, and even London looks dull. There's no sense of grandeur or magic, just a lot of washed-out colors and uninspired set pieces. The world building, which should be a highlight in a Thor movie, feels like an afterthought. The film takes itself seriously, but hasn't earned it, and the humor feels tacked on and disconnected. Jokes land with a thud, and the attempts at levity only highlight how little fun anyone seems to be having. It's as if the movie is trying to remind you it's a Marvel film, but it doesn't really believe it. The only saving grace is the dynamic between Thor and Loki. Their sibling rivalry, full of banter and betrayal, injects some much-needed life into the story. Whenever they're on screen together, you can feel the energy pick up. Their scenes crackle with energy and emotion. Tom Hiddleston's Loki is mischievous and unpredictable, while Chris Hemsworth's Thor is earnest and conflicted. It's the one relationship in the film that feels real and compelling. Loki's death and Frigga's funeral are the film's only memorable moments. These scenes actually manage to evoke some genuine emotion, reminding you of what the movie could have been if it had focused more on character and less on spectacle. The final battle is a confusing mess of portals and science experiments, with an anticlimactic villain defeat. Instead of building tension, the action just becomes noise. Characters jumping between worlds, objects flying everywhere, and a resolution that feels rushed and unsatisfying. The movie is so focused on undoing the first film and setting up sequels that it forgets to tell a compelling story. It's more interested in moving pieces around the Marvel chessboard than in making you care about what's happening right now. It's the awkward middle child of the trilogy, competent but completely devoid of passion. It doesn't have the novelty of the first Thor or the wild creativity of Ragnarok. Instead, it just sort of exists, hoping you won't notice how little it has to offer. When you think back, you remember Loki, not the plot or the villain. He's the only character who leaves any kind of impression, and it's telling that the movie's legacy is tied almost entirely to him. The Dark World isn't spectacularly bad, just spectacularly boring. It's the cinematic equivalent of background noise, something you can have on while you do something else and not miss a thing. In a universe full of memorable moments, its greatest sin is being forgettable. It doesn't inspire strong feelings, good or bad. It just sort of fades into the background, overshadowed by everything else Marvel has to offer. It's not as disastrous as Love and Thunder or as hollow as Quantumania, but it's the definition of generic. There's nothing here to get excited about, nothing to hate, nothing to love. The Dark World is a void, 2 hours of adequate, forgettable filmmaking. It's a movie that exists simply because it had to, not because anyone had a story they were passionate about telling. That's why it rounds out my bottom 3. In a franchise built on larger-than-life heroes and unforgettable adventures, Thor, The Dark World is a reminder that sometimes the worst thing a movie can be is just plain dull. So there you have it, my bottom 3 MCU films, Love and Thunder, Quantumania, and The Dark World. Each one suffers from weak scripts, underdeveloped villains, and a lack of real character work. Breaking down these misfires helps us appreciate the MCU's true highlights. But that's just my take. What are your bottom 3? Let's talk in the comments. Argue, agree, share your own rankings. Subscribe for more hot takes and deep dives as I move up the list. See you next time for another MCU breakdown.